Welcome back to some new malicious compliance stories, where people complied to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Mean Waitress. I lived in Sedona, but would go down to Phoenix for doctor's appointments and big city stuff. I went to a sushi bar, and my waiter was this poor college-age guy, totally in over his head, but trying. He double-checked my order, took forever to get me my iced tea, and was running all over the place. Bad service can be aggravating, but he was so panicked I felt sorry for him. I get rattled easily and would be a terrible waitress, so I could sympathize. I could see two female waitresses off in the corner, glaring at him and gossiping. After I ate, he kind of disappeared. He may have been fired at this point. I don't really know. I raved at the two female waiters. Nothing. After about 10 more minutes, I walked up and asked if I could get my bill. They huffed and made a comment that I wasn't their table, but would check. I could see more grumbling. They brought the check out and it was the wrong one, about a third less than I had ordered. I tried to get their attention again, but they weren't having it, so I went to the register and paid. After I paid, I said I tried to get your attention and let you know you gave me the wrong bill. I think they thought I was going to ask for a refund. I just said thanks. My bill was a third of what it would have been. One of the waitresses looked a little panicky and said wait, we'll do it over. But I just said no thanks, I'm fine, and left. The next story is called Micromanagement. Years ago, I worked for a public institution, where the supervisor was a total control freak. She was hardly able to delegate the most mundane tasks, and even when she did, she would monitor what her number 2 was doing, and give him hell if he dared to call a shot himself. Now, in my field, by law, everybody needs to follow 48 hours of mandatory continued training per 3-year span. The state offers a wide selection of different courses you are free to pick from. If you want or need to get your training from any other agency and/or private company, you need permission from your supervisor. Now, my former supervisor thought that some of these trainings were frivolous. Things like yoga classes, meant to prevent burnout, or first aid classes, which, according to her, you should and could do on your own time. So she decided that all training needed to be green-lighted by herself, which was obviously against the law. Most colleagues decided to ignore that order, since it was illegal. And we can't be written up or otherwise disciplined for not following an illegal order. I, on the other hand, thought it would be more fun to comply. So I designed a permission form, where I could copy-paste all information from the online curriculum within seconds, and check the training offer. I picked quite a number of 2 hours trainings, and introduced a form for each one of them. Plus, I sent my form out to all my colleagues, around 175 of them, to make asking for permission easier for them. Quite many picked up on the idea, and introduced my form for their trainings as well, so that the control freak supervisor was swamped with hundreds of forms. Within a single week, we were quite quickly back to being allowed to follow any of the state's trainings freely. The third story is called Language Guidelines. I studied history in Germany, and while there, an African exchange student enrolled as well. He had a very thick accent, and he had quite a lot of trouble putting his thoughts to paper. So when an assignment was due, he asked the elderly professor if we could write the assignment in English, where he had way more ease expressing himself. The elderly professor didn't want to admit that his English was rather bad, so instead he referenced the university guidelines that stipulated that, except for language studies, all assignments were to be written in either German or Latin. Little did the professor know that the African exchange student was in fact schooled in a Jesuit monastery, so he did turn in the assignment in perfect Latin. Since the professor had specialized in modern history, he needed the help of a Latin professor to grade the assignment. The university guidelines have been amended a year later. Assignments in Latin are only acceptable for those studying Latin anymore. The next story is called Can Go Home. This happened about 15 years ago. I was a tool and die maker by trade then, and was working an overtime shift at a Tier 1 supplier automotive stamping plant on a Saturday morning at 6 AM. Usually, if anything is going wrong, it will happen in the first 30 minutes of a press startup, since they have to align the coil and get the strip through the die. Once the presses get going, then you can start to look at what dies are scheduled to run next and check them accordingly. But if you start to work on a die and a press goes down, it will most likely involve picking up whatever you have taken out already and rolling your toolbox to the press. This is why I was waiting 30 minutes before starting any shop work. My supervisor at the time, we'll call him Root E, came into the tool room, saw me reading paper, and came over and asked what I was doing. I explained it to him, to which he replied, "What's next? You want me to put a bed upstairs?" I said if he did, that I would support him 100% and laughed. I guess he wasn't amused, because he said, "If you think you are gonna come in on overtime and stand around reading the paper for 30 minutes, you can go home." Root E then stormed off out of the shop. After he left, I started locking up my boxes and putting my shoes on. My co-worker on shift asked where I was going. I told him Root E said I could go home. About 20 minutes later, Root E comes back into the shop looking for me. He asked my co-worker where I was. My co-worker told him that you told him he could go home. He then told my co-worker to come with him, and he was stuck at a press for 3 hours alone. If only he had been patient and trusted my judgment, he would have had 2 guys on a press call, and not 1. The last story is called Bad Car Dealer. This happened about 17 years ago, in a major city, in the very south of the Netherlands. I had a new job and we needed a second car. We bought a new Twingo, a car that went for about 12,000 euros. There were 2 stipulations in the contract when we bought the car. Number 1 was that we had to get financing through Renault, and number 2 was that 3 years maintenance was included. We financed a minor part for 3 years at 0% interest. After the first year, I took the car for its first service. I had about 12,000 kilometers on it. When I dropped the car off, I was asked if there was anything that needed attention. I think I answered something like, "Do whatever you need to do." In the late afternoon, when I picked up the car, 3 rather bulky men were standing behind the service desk. I remember they were really focused on me when I was presented with the bill. The bill was for about 1,000 euros. For a 1-year-old car with just 12,000 kilometers. I immediately understood what had happened. They must have figured that they could inflate the bill with all kinds of nonsense maintenance actions, since I gave them carte blanche. And to avoid any troubles, they made sure that I could be intimidated by them being with 3 people. I just very friendly asked for my car key. "But you have to pay first." "No, I don't. Please, may I have my car keys?" Instead of enlightening them straight away, I kept going like this for a bit longer. When things started to get a bit unfriendly, I reminded the rep that I had bought the car at this dealership, including 3 years of maintenance. All 3 guys turned a few shades lighter, frantically searching for the contract, whispering, moving away to the office out of earshot. It took about 10 minutes before the rep came back out and handed me my keys. I ended up getting its 3rd service just before the 3 years had elapsed. As soon as I got the title to the car, I traded it in for a car of a different brand. And as you would expect, the bill for the 2nd and 3rd services were far less. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. And now, I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.